Hey everyone, my name is Patrick, and thank you for joining us on Create, Post, Repeat, a podcast all about the content creation journey. Today I get to talk to my longtime friend Tyler Moore, but you may know Tyler as Tidydad. And Tidydad has taken a really unique approach to tidying up his life using his Instagram account, which over the past few years has grown to almost 400,000 subscribers. So I know that you're really going to enjoy this conversation today. Welcome to the podcast, everybody. As you know, my name is Patrick, if you've been here a while, and this is my good friend Tyler, but you may know him as Tidydad. And Tyler, thank you so much for being here. I'm really glad that you are joining us on the podcast, on the video today.
Thanks for having me. And it's actually from Good Morning America. You're supposed to call me a social media like superstar. That's the actual like quote now for the introduction.
I feel like you're already flexing on me so hard. Here I am in my lowly office recording with whatever I have in front of me, and you're flexing with your Good Morning America. But you're right, you are a social media what was it? Icon, superstar, legend? What?
Oh, all of them.
Did they say when you went? So you went on Good Morning America. They actually introduced you as a superstar, social media superstar.
Yeah, they have this like Insta Parent series. So it's basically the parents of Instagram who sort of teach in a particular niche. They like bring them on, they do some sort of segment. But yeah, and then at the end, they commented on how much they liked the name Tidydad, and they said like Tidydad to the rescue, or like we need to just send Tidydad into the rescue. And I was like, hey, that's actually a good like tag phrase.
When you do your Blippy spinoff partnership, you will be Tidydad to the rescue. My question is, at what point in the Good Morning America interview did you talk about me?
Yeah. Well, they didn't ask. They didn't ask about the board of directors.
That's right. So before we get too far into the bod, would you just, I mean, we're kind of already in it, but would you just take a couple of minutes? You and I have been friends for a really long time. And I remember years ago saying, oh my gosh, Teresa, to my wife, Tyler's at 8,000 followers on Instagram. He's doing it. He's made it. This is crazy. And now you, as an Instagram influencer, as a content creator, have grown to well over 300, like last time I checked, around 370, 80 followers. So would you briefly give us just like here's who you are, here's what you do, this is why you create, and what platform you're on?
Yeah. So we started Instagram in January of 2019. That was the primary platform that we sort of launched on. And at the time, I didn't know anything about Instagram or social media. And it's funny because yesterday I actually posted like a Tidydad throwback. And it was our very first post, which was my sister-in-law. She came up to our apartment. She filmed our closets, and then we uploaded it on Instagram. But I remember asking her at the time, like, what's the difference between a post? What do you mean stories? They're only 15 seconds. Like, what's the difference between stories? What's the difference between posts? But at the time, I didn't really know anything about the platform. Besides, everybody seemed to be on it. So like back in 2019, it was mainly photo based, but every big person or every big name sort of had a following or a platform on Instagram. And at the time, it sort of seemed like the gold standard. It seemed like you had Facebook, you had Instagram, you had Snapchat. I knew what Facebook was, but we started on Instagram mainly sharing things about our home because at the time Marie Kondo had just come out with a show. It was called Tidying Up with Marie Kondo. It was in 2019. The previous year we had tidied up our physical space, but on Facebook, a lot of the like mom communities, there was a lot of buzz about the show, but people were saying, this just doesn't seem realistic if you have kids, and this doesn't seem realistic if you live in small spaces. So I feel like at the time, I didn't consciously know this, but I now know it, which is like anytime you're sort of starting a business or starting a platform or thinking about a niche, it's like you have to identify sort of the hole in the market and then figure out how do you like press into that. And so unconsciously posting as a dad and posting apartment related content, posting, tips that we were using with our girls, dad life, things that I was experiencing, it really started to strike a chord with people. Our page we started as More Living because my last name is Moore. It was going to be my wife and I. A few weeks into posting on Instagram, my wife quickly realized that she didn't like to be the one on the camera, even though she was in that first video. And I was the one that more so enjoyed it because I had a background in journalism. I enjoyed the storytelling aspect. I enjoyed the creativity of sort of figuring out how does Instagram work. And then I just started telling stories. And about 6 weeks into our journey, I was on a ski trip with my friend and he did marketing. He was working for Spotify, and I had been using the hashtag Tidydad in a lot of my posts. And I don't really know where that came from at first, apart from I'm a dad who likes to tidy. So I sort of put it together. And he was like, from a branding standpoint, that seems to be really gold because the name, it's catchy. It immediately sort of tells the viewer or the user or the consumer what they should expect from your content. And you do have a new perspective. So I feel like with that initial launch, it was really, at first, it was trying to figure out the platform. It was trying to figure out
Yeah.
what do I enjoy sort of sharing about. But as I've learned now, 4 years into it, you also have to sort of navigate the waves within a niche and figure out the content that resonates with people. And at first, when I started Instagram, I thought this would be a great way to market to people in our neighborhood who might like to have in-person, like tidying consultations. And that's what I thought I was going to do. I
Yep.
did a couple of those and I didn't really like spending my Saturdays away from my kids. I already work a full-time job as a teacher. And so I
Yeah.
was like, why am I doing this? So then a couple of weeks later, I pivoted and I thought, I'm going to host in-person tidying events for families where they can bring their kids and I can teach
Wow.
them how to tidy. Because obviously being a teacher, I thought this really plays to my strengths. We would have like 2 people show up. But then I started posting videos on Instagram, and this was back before Reels were a thing. I always found that video was more forgiving, that with photography and with the old Instagram feed, everything had to be like perfectly curated. Like you had to have the consistent filter, you had to have the beautifully shot photos. If you have kids in your house, you know that it's very difficult to have anything sort of like beautifully staged and
Yeah.
curated. So that's
Yeah.
when I started moving to video because I more naturally sort of liked talking on video. I also thought with my particular niche, video is actually a better storytelling tool than just a photo is. And so in those first few like months, it really was navigating the platform. And then across 4 years, it's been continuing to evolve and adapt given the changes of the users of the social
Yeah.
media platform, but also
Yeah.
with balancing like my work as a teacher and at home, I have to think about like what's most efficient to get my messages out to people.
Yeah, I mean, you've basically just highlighted like, all the stuff that I'm like, maybe we'll talk about this, maybe we'll talk about this. You basically hit it all in that one paragraph. So we can end now. That was great. Thank you. um, so in the YouTube world, and I know in other, which is primarily what I do, what you've said the word niche a ton of times, and we always talk about niching down, and this is something that's actually been really hard for me. And it seems like you hit the nail on the head, like the finding, I think you said finding a hole in the niche where you're at. Because I remember, I think you've done that beautifully because I remember, I want to rewind and say, I remember before you were Tidydad and you were just Tyler who wanted to tidy up his life. I remember sitting in a room with you and you telling me the story of you said a few minutes ago that you and Emily began tidying up together. It was actually you who began tidying up by yourself. And I'm throwing you under the bus here. Her coming home and being like, "What did you do to our apartment?" And I would sit there and laugh at those stories. But it's kind of become this thing where you are the tidy dad. But you also said she doesn't like being in front of the camera, but she is also, and I know this just from knowing you, she's like a valuable part of what you do. She's basically like now she is kind of like behind the scenes, running what is now, I'm going to say, a business. And I know that you guys are still partners there, but I just not to get too much in the weeds here. I think it's amazing how you were able to see, not only am I good at this, but I have this very specific spot I can fit in that is clearly resonating with people. Do you remember when your friend told you Tidy Dad really works? Did it just click, or did it take time to convince you of that, or what was that like for you?
I mean, initially, so I thought that the name sounded great. And from the storytelling aspect, I was like, this totally fits. I think what was difficult at first with Emily was, okay, if we change from More Living to Tidy Dad, have you somehow written me out of the story? And
Yeah.
initially, from followers, people would often question, they're like, okay, so you're a single dad with 3 kids. And it was because in a lot of my content, I was using, especially in the caption, and this was before I started the blog, which was the tidydad.com. There was like the initial launch of Tidydad. And then 6 months later, I started publishing on my blog and website. And in the interim, I had to switch from using the pronoun of I to using the pronoun of we. And just shifting
Right.
the use of that pronoun helped. But then there was also, how do you use any sort of tool in terms of branding? And so from Instagram, and similar to YouTube, like you obviously have your handle, but then you have your bio or your description. And so
Yeah.
that has changed so many times as we've like
Hmm.
narrowed the niche or as we've changed a little bit. Um, but one of the things that was most helpful for niching down, as people call it, is there's a very helpful person. She's in marketing. Her name is Jenna Kutcher, and she talks all the time about how in a business you need to establish what your pillars are. And obviously, the pillars all lead towards this like larger mission or goal that you have for your business. And so, from the pillars standpoint, when we first started, I knew that I wanted to share about tidying. I knew I wanted to share about organizing, cleaning. There was then like dad life, which was this sort of catch all sort of bucket, and kid life. And so that's sort of how we started. But it's like talking about that 4 years later, I've had to evolve and change what that niche is, still keeping true to the Tidy Dad. Like when someone comes to the Tidy Dad page, they know I need to be getting like tidying or organizing content. I need to see like, what do you do to make a space sustainable for kids? How do you set up systems? So it's been, an evolution, as we've
Yeah.
gone throughout these 4 years.
So one thing that I also really, really struggle with is I feel as a content creator that I've never done. I make, every YouTuber's folly when they get started is they make the crispiest video ever. And what they have to kind of fall on their face and learn about is there's an algorithm, creating titles, your description matters. You can't just have the best video ever and then a garbage description because the algorithm that is Google will not find you. Your YouTube page has to look good. You also then have to take your audio and transcribe it to then create some sort of a blog, so then people can also find you. Then for your world, then I have to take my long form YouTube video, chop it up into reels, so that people on Instagram are finding my reels, then finding my blog, then finding my channel. Do you think you've come to a point in your content creation systems where you're like, oh yeah, that's good. When we've got an idea, our bio is done, our blog is done, or is that a constant battle for you as well?
I think it's a constant battle and it's constantly evolving. But what I'll say is that I consistently find that I just have to continue to break down the concepts into much more bite-sized pieces of information.
Hmm.
So, for example, like today I put up a post about toy rotation. Toy rotation is a system that I talk about all the time. But if I were to take like the umbrella of toy rotation, there are hundreds of different of concepts that could branch off from that one idea. And I feel like as creators, sometimes people fall into the trap of feeling like they have to make that one video that fully explains this one idea in order for the audience to be able to get it. Where the reality is people want bite-sized pieces of information. And this another helpful Instagram account that I follow, her name on Instagram, it's Virginia Reels. And she used to be she was an on-air anchor at a local news station. She was completely burnt out because she was only reading really horrible, like local news stories. And so now she teaches people basically how to create YouTube videos, how to do Instagram, basically how to be an on-camera personality like she used to be professionally. But she talked about how, and this has been really helpful, is basically your feed becomes it's basically all of the different ideas that relate to your particular topic. You're basically creating this like scrapbook for people to go back and look through. Like it's all of these different ideas. It's like a portfolio of all of your best concepts. And the idea is that you're always just like, it takes pressure off yourself for a certain video to perform because you're basically just like dropping and you're dripping different ideas that relate back to your niche. But when you start to think of all of your posts as this like sum of what your brand represents, it helps to take some of that pressure off of each individual video performing to a certain level. And it's knowing that with that idea of a toy rotation, like for the next 5 years, I could post a different video on toy rotation twice a month, and I would not run out of content ideas because the more you simplify and trim and condense content, or break it down based on questions that your audience asks, you can always continue to evolve like your message and what you're sharing.
That I think that's so true. You've already mentioned a couple of people. Who are some of your other content creation heroes? Like, who are you following, and who? I mean, besides me. I mean, we're already here. We don't have to talk about me anymore as a legendary influencer, as you said. But one of mine, I mean, while you're thinking, is I recently found a guy, and this really speaks to what you're saying, I think. And correct me if I'm wrong. His Instagram handle is Nick Nik Goodner, good Ner, and he is someone who his whole feed is helping content creators grow, which is so funny that that's also a niche. It's like content creators who help content creators. I actually do a lot of that on YouTube, even though I'm still growing because I've learned a lot. And he basically said, and I'm very much summing this up. He said this way more eloquently that your stories should be. I think one word you said that I really liked was just a drip. It's like your stories are, check this out, small idea here. Wasn't this interesting? Wasn't this fun? Whereas your posts are like your journal entries of who you are and what you do. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and the business side is the real or whatever content like should somehow lead towards the sale of something. And that's what I've had to learn too, is that like whether it's selling an idea, whether it's selling an individual product, whether it's selling like here's how you can go deeper with the content that I'm producing, that's something that I've had to think about because you also have to know on each of the platforms what are the revenue streams. So like for
Yeah.
Instagram, for example, they now have like the reels bonuses where they're paying for views. um,
Oh.
it's a feature that, and it's coming to YouTube also because YouTube
Yeah.
is coming out with like the YouTube shorts, which I think is going to be like more like, I don't know if it's vertical or horizontal or whatever, but people keep telling me
It's
to
vertical.
like get ready for it. um, but also, on Instagram, people can directly shop through story
Yes.
links. And then
Yes.
people also directly shop through DMs. And DMs are where you make so many of the sales. And so I've had to think about too, all right, how can I introduce a concept in the reel? So like today, the example is I shared about our toy rotation. I showed several different organizational pieces in the toy rotation. What immediately happened was I started getting dozens and dozens of DMs of, can you send me the link to that organizer? Can you send me the link to the basket? Where did you get this item? So then in stories, I started to link. So we have like roundup blogs from the tidydad.com that have all of those organization items. We have Amazon storefronts. And so the idea is like, it's like peeling back the curtain a little bit is I don't ever explicitly say in a reel, like, unless it is a paid sponsorship or some sort of ad that I'm posting. It's about being like, it's not intentionally vague, but it's not, you don't show all of your cards. Like you show
It's
your
being
cards when
interesting.
you're actually like selling, but it's more so like, here's the philosophy, here's the idea, but then the business side, and this we've had to learn over the years is, okay, how are you then ready to sell to people? Because people are there not just to consume content, but when you know your ideal audience, you have a sense of what are the things that they're looking to purchase for their own homes, or what are the things that they want um, to bring in, which is why in my particular niche, so obviously tidying, organizing, and cleaning, I'm constantly running attention because I can't be one of the influencers who is constantly showing off all of the products. And for example, like the like to know it pages that lots of influencers use, which is basically you can link every part of your aspect, every part of your outfit, or you can link to all of the stuff that's in your home. Um, I run a fine line between being able to directly sell to people while also preaching this concept of like just enough, or how do you simplify, or
Right.
how do
Interesting.
sort of stop the amount of stuff that's coming into your home. And so it's also knowing within your niche, there's so many different words that you can use. So in my niche of tidying and organizing, there are words that I never use, which are minimalism or decluttering. Um, I
Is
do
it too
use the word
saturated?
simplify. No, I use it. I don't use those because what I find is that creators who use decluttering or minimalism have a very difficult time selling things to people. Like you can't preach minimalism
Interesting.
while also then saying, here's a really great toy that I got for my kids. Or,
Yeah.
like, here's this really great new like bath mat that I brought into my house. Um, so because the audience then gets turned off because they're like, hey, I thought that you were telling me to go like fully edit my bathroom, but
Yes.
now you're like telling me all of this stuff that I need to bring in. So it's constantly sort of like balancing what are the trends within your niche? What are the available sort of like products, brands, people that you can work with? And then how do you directly sell to people without coming across as like a salesman and doing it in like a real authentic way? And I used to hate anything related to selling. Going back to my wife, she manages all of the business side. And basically, after that first 6 months of being on Instagram and having Tidydad, I was really frustrated by the length of captions. And I knew that I didn't want all of my eggs in one basket, which is a social media platform. Everybody kept saying, you've got to have something that's actually yours that you own. And so that was a
Mm.
website and having a blog. And I found that, well, I shared with my wife, I'm like, I really want to do like long form, like personal writing, do more blogging. And so we hired someone. We paid them, it was a friend from a church that we used to go to. We paid her $1,000, which at the time
Yeah.
felt like a ridiculous amount of money to pay for
Astronomical.
something, and incredibly selfish because I was like, I'm not making any money. Like, how can I pay $1,000 for this website? And a colleague of mine, she was like, people spend lots of money on hobbies all the time. People spend money
Yes.
on trips all the time, workout equipment, and they don't expect a monetary return back. basically take the pressure off of yourself, invest $1,000 and see where it goes. Um, and so when I put the chunk of change into Tidydad, we started in debt essentially because we
Mm.
weren't really making any money on Instagram. I didn't know how you could do it. I didn't really know how websites could make money. So that's when my wife started from a business standpoint. And that was when we had like maybe 500 followers. I mean, we didn't have like any followers.
Which there are 13-year-olds that have thousands of followers now, you know?
Correct. So
Yeah.
I didn't know how to make money, but then my
Mm.
wife was like, okay, I'm gonna figure that side out. She was
Yeah.
staying home at the time, staying home with our kids. Um, she was like, in a kind way, but like you can't just have a hobby that you spend all this. This can't just be a time-consuming hobby. Like, let's figure out, do we want to make this into something? And
Yeah.
so each year, we learned a little bit more. We
Each
were able
week
to
you probably
start
learned a little bit
each
more.
each week. Yeah, we were able to
Yeah.
start. You start with like gifted products, and then paid collaborations can come, but then there are all these like shadow sort of ways to bring in revenue because all of the different brands, they need content creators to create like user generated content, so they'll pay you to use your skills to like make a video for them that you can then sell to them to use for their various platforms. So there are lots of different ways that we were able to figure out the revenue, but that was never ever my goal, which is like going back to your first question. My goal was never ever to make any money. My goal was to inspire other families who are living in small spaces to like continue to live the small space fight, which like we've talked about before. You have 3 kids, I have 3 kids. There is this pressure of the outside world to pursue more, this idea of families of 5 living in 2-bedroom apartments or 3-bedroom apartments is so radical.
Radical is one word. Terrifying is another word. Uh,
That was my goal with content, was like I want people to be inspired to make decisions that are best for them and their families and not feel this external pressure from others to conform, or as I had found myself before with my own tidy up my life journey with my career, like not feeling the pressure to take on different job responsibilities or living in certain locations just because that's what you think other people think that you should be doing. And
hmm.
so that's the heart of Tidydad. And so I feel like what's been fun and what continues to this day, and it's why I continue to teach, is I'm not fully ready to make it the full career because I worry that some of the like joy and the organic nature with which I'm able to sort of produce content, work with different brands, I'm afraid that the external pressure to now like provide for my family through video content
Yeah.
would somehow taint the overall experience. But yet at the same time, I do have to make sure that I'm compensated for all the time that
Yeah.
I'm putting into it and that my wife is putting into it.
If you're not compensated, somebody else will be.
100%. Yeah, we do not work for free. That's my epitaph. That's what's going on my tombstone.
Man, again, you just hit so many while answering a question really, really well. You're a great interview because, like, while answering a question really, really well, you're also just driving so much other interests. Um, I want to go back to what you said about reels and shorts because I think not to get too businessy, but like that is right now such a hot a market on every platform, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. And all of those companies, you see creators dancing between them because each one of those companies is saying, we'll give you more money. You have, I think it was Instagram, or sorry, TikTok and YouTube. TikTok was finally saying, we will pay users, we will pay creators for views, et cetera, et cetera. And YouTube said, we now have a pile of cash to pay creators, and we're going to give them. I think they said So like, I don't know what the actual number was. Let's pretend it was 40%. We'll give them 40% of the ad revenue. And TikTok came out and very publicly said, we'll give them 41. So it's like a hot space right now where you see creators jumping to where am I going to give my time where I'm going to see the most return. I think that's really interesting. It's funny that like so from a YouTube standpoint, I'm pretty familiar with shorts, and from a Instagram standpoint, you're very familiar with reels. And I'm sitting here going, man, I knew more about reels, and you're going, yeah, I know a bit about shorts. You know, it's so funny how we can live in this same space on different platforms, and it's such a different experience.
And related to that, what we've been trying to figure out is between the platforms, it's like, where does the ideal audience sort of lie? And it goes back to the business side of like, where are the consumers then of what it is that you're selling? And so like I'm
Yeah.
on TikTok. It's funny because the kids at school, sometimes at recess, I'm like, can you tell me like what this is on TikTok? Because even the idea of like TikTok sort of has stories, but yet you can't put your posts like in stories like you can on
You're using your
Instagram.
students to crowdsource.
Yeah. So I'm like, can you teach me like how to do this? And I get asked a lot where people are like, can you please go on YouTube? Because I want to see
Yeah.
your longer form content. And I
Yeah.
do think that but I do think that it comes down to time and energy and sort of where, from a branding standpoint, it makes the most sense for you to be. And
Yeah.
so what we're also doing now is we're putting more time into Pinterest, because Pinterest now, it's not
Yes.
just standard
Yep.
photos and pins. There are now all of the different like video pins. So
Yep.
basically all of the platforms, you know, they all start to do the same thing in some ways. And so it's figuring out what's the biggest like return on investment, which is all of
Yeah.
this. It's that like, what is the actual ROI? Where are the different brands that you want to work with? Everybody's sort of falling into TikTok and Instagram. Facebook now seems to have been left behind, and at least for
Yeah.
me right now.
I think Facebook Reels are blowing up a little bit.
Yeah, and I just don't even know how to like make a Facebook post anymore. So it is, it's just figuring out where to go. And it's interesting because I had a business call last week because we were looking at hiring like an agency to start to do some of our brand negotiations and
Yeah.
whatever. But she was saying that now lots of brands are looking for engagement on LinkedIn, and that LinkedIn is actually becoming a really big sort of social media platform. I'm on
Just
LinkedIn. I don't really know how to use it, but all that to say, it goes back to business and like, what is your bottom line? And so it's like, where are you putting your time? Where are you putting your energy? And what is that return? And it all goes back to your actual like business goals of what are you trying to do? Um, but also, how much time can you devote to investing in each of these platforms and really learning them?
yeah.
So that's been tricky.
Let's talk about that a little bit because, you've said this multiple times, but you're a full-time teacher. You're a husband. You're a dad of three. You have hobbies. My life is in some ways similar. I'm a full-time employee at a church. I'm a content creator. I have a wife who also works full time. Emily works, and I have three kids, and I am often I often find myself in that place where I realize like if you want to do like the reason why people are not successful in the content creation world is hey, if their stuff is garbage, then they won't be successful. But like people who make good things, why are they not successful? Because they quit after a year. It's very hard with a real life to continue creating. It's real hard. Your $1,000 website was my camera. I said, I think to create, it's time for me to get a real camera. And my wife said, let's do it. Yeah, invest in it. And that was a hard choice. And it kind of fuels me to go, I'm going to do this another year. Oh, I'm currently right now, I'm about 30 subscribers away from 2,000 compared to your almost 400. I know it's a little, but like for me, that's huge. And I'm going, it's like, it's fueling me. How do you, as a full-time dad, full-time husband, full-time teacher, create space or find space to also manage you and Emily both, this thriving content creation career as well.
I feel like it's interesting because our goal for our word for 2023 is actually sustainability, because that's the tension that we're finding right now, is that idea of making this sustainable. And so as we've gone into 2023, we actually just hired two virtual assistants to help with different aspects of the business. So we have one who's working solely on Pinterest because she has an expertise and background in it, and another who's helping with writing of content for the website. Because what we had to do is we had to identify the types of work that we both enjoyed doing. So I enjoy coming up with the ideas, I enjoy filming, I enjoy editing, I enjoy putting it together. I enjoy all of that Monday through Friday. By the weekends, I'm done. So we've largely been running a Monday through Friday account. And part of that is because I'm a teacher, I'm very routine driven. But I also know that my content with my audience really makes sense Monday through Friday. They always like to see what we're doing on the weekends. But I also know, which we'll be posting some this weekend, but um, when I post something, the idea with social media is that people then send you lots of messages about it, or they write lots of comments. But the idea is that you also then have to comment back and respond back and engage with them and have this conversation back and forth. But sometimes that is what can feel exhausting. My wife gets really energized by pitching brands, negotiating contracts, sort of keeping track of all of the finances, being able to calendar and schedule for me, like what needs to be filmed when.
Yep.
She does enjoy that aspect. So we've had to identify like what aspects of content creation and the business do we both really enjoy. But now we're trying to figure out how do we bring in other people who have greater expertise than we do in order to scale up this business if that's what we want. Um, and that's really the big question, is like, what do we want from all of this? Because still at the end of the day, I would post content for free. I would go on podcasts. I love doing TV interviews. I like, doing magazine publications. The majority of that is unpaid. So I would continue to do all the unpaid work.
It's
But that
exposure.
goes
Yeah.
back to, what we're talking about, of that's when it becomes like a time consuming hobby. And so you do want to have the balance. But I do feel like in general, I still enjoy the creativity of coming up with different content streams, with new series. I am energized by DMs that I get from people that,
Yeah.
they're always telling me stories of how a tip has resonated with them, or there's been some sort of aspect that they've tried based on something that I've shared. But also what continues to fuel me is that there's not, I can't currently identify a male competitor in my space
Mm.
that's doing something similar. There are lots of men out there who are now doing more with content creation, but in different niches. It's like there's still a lot of stereotypes with men across social media platforms. It's like
Sure.
you have cars, you have fitness, you have sports, um, you have sort of like business related niches, sort of what you were sharing about, like niches related to content creation. But the home space is still really heavily dominated by women, which there are a lot of societal reasons why. Um, but I do enjoy, and it does drive me, that there is this like dad out there that people call like the modern day Mr. Rogers, which it's funny, because I'm in like my sweater and my shirt right now. But like that's me. Like I'm sort of like the modern day Mr. Rogers who's like out there, trying to inspire people to tidy up some sort of aspect of their life. But I don't currently see many people doing what I'm doing, which is kind of a fun space to be in.
I'm going to push you just a little bit harder. So you're energized by these things, but you come home after a long day of work. I know just because I'm your friend, you wake up very early. Where do you carve out the time to create? Are you, so kids are in bed at what, 7, 8, 6, something, evening. Are you sitting there going, well, I'm on my phone making some edits? Are you, and I'm not watching that TV show? Or what are the disciplines you have in your life that make this content actually get created?
We have in our day, we always have mapped out. What I try to do is I map out the full month of Reels content for the week. Or I map out all of my Reels content for the entire month. So that I know beforehand. So what I've had to do is I've borrowed some of my structures as a teacher. That's sort of like my unit plan, which is like your overall sort of scope. One thing that's helped is I've had to simplify when I post about certain topics, and it's become sort of habitual. So on Instagram, I have a weekday cleaning routine. So back
Yep.
at the end of the summer, I'm like, okay, how can I use my weekday cleaning routine to streamline the content that I'm producing? And so I thought, okay, I cleaned the bathroom on Monday, the kitchen on Tuesday, the living room on Wednesday, the bedrooms on Thursday, the playroom on Friday. So I now produce content related to each of those areas of the house on that day of the week. So, for example, on Tuesday, I have a sponsored reel that I'm posting for Cook Smarts, which is this meal planning service that we
Yeah.
use. When they asked, which day do you want this to go live? I said, I post about kitchen related things on Tuesday. Let's schedule it for a Tuesday because it's helpful for my brain to know on Tuesdays, I talk about kitchen stuff. It's helpful for my audience because they know a lot of it is subconsciously, but like on Tuesdays, I'm going to share kitchen related stuff. Basically, my content lives in the area of the house that I'm cleaning. So, to your question of like balance, like that has helped. I had to figure out what is the system that I can use where content just naturally sort of flows and builds itself. And that way, in a month, I need 4 kitchen or food related reels that I can post on a Tuesday. And that makes it feel much less daunting. Then, when we have any sort of like branded stories that relate to one of those areas, like Betty's, we have this bedding where you're able to zipper yourself in. It's amazing.
I haven't seen that. Wait, you have bedding that you zip into?
Yeah, you zipper yourself in. It's amazing. It's great for bunk beds, but they also make it for adult size beds. That way, all of your sheets and stuff don't fall off the edge of the bed. You literally zipper it in. It's amazing. Fridays are my day to really talk about toys because we're talking about playroom. So that figuring out that structure helped a lot. But then to our day, we have an act one and we have an act two, and then we have an intermission. So
Wow.
my wife is responsible for intermission. I'm responsible for act one and act two. Act one are the stories that I post from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. 7 a.m., my reel for the day always goes live. I have to know at 5 a.m., my stories all have to lead to the crescendo, which is my reel. So everything that I'm doing is like leading up to here is this reel or here is this teaching content that I'm going to give you that day. And then what a good reel will do, like today's, which was toy rotation, my DMs should blow up with what is this? What is that? What is this? What is that? Can you share this with me? That then, because Emily checks the DMs while I'm at school, she does it in the morning from like 8:30 until 9:30. Because she has like a babysitting swap. She identifies what are the 4 to 5 links that I'm going to share publicly in stories. So it could be, product links, it could be blogs from our website, it could be other reels. Basically, she has to figure out, okay, how am I going to bridge the act one to the act two? Act two happens when I get home from school with the girls. And so I'm somehow figuring out, okay, how am I going to tie the bow onto this day? So that predictable rhythm that helps to eliminate the mental load. And so to your question around like the creation of the content, like I am creating sometimes at night. I like to try to batch stuff on the weekends. But what I also do is with my particular style, I use a ton of B-roll and or just like organic content from around. I'm not in my schedule, I can't be one of those creators who's always directly talking to the camera, like in the form of the reel. I can talk on camera through stories. It's very easy for me. But like when I talk about those 5 a.m. stories, I always greet my audience in the morning with like the same way that I say hello. I tell them what day it is, what we're going to clean. And then I have like four at least different B-roll stories of me cleaning that area of the house. But what I also do is I use the caption on the story to explain like what's going on in my head. And that's what's leading to the reel for that day. So everything, I mean, to me, I've just had to streamline how do I create the content? How do I think about it?
Yeah.
But it really does come from being a teacher and figuring out like, okay, what is that overall unit plan? And then figuring out basically each day is sort of like my lesson plan of like, okay, like what am I going to teach that particular day?
That's just insane, man. That is insanely great. It's inspiring. It makes tons of sense looking at it as in like acts in a play, act. What is intermission?
Intermission is when I'm not on camera. So intermission are all of the links that my wife posts.
Oh,
So the idea is that during intermission you don't see the actor. So like I'm the actor on stage in act 1 and act 2.
oh,
Intermission is when you're like getting the snacks or when you're like that, like that's when you're up and moving, you're sort of like talking about what happened in act 1, you're getting ready for act 2. But we needed something to happen during the school day because the idea with Instagram also is you don't want to post all of the day's stories all at once. Like
yeah,
you've got to drip them throughout the day, because as you drip them throughout the day, your little circle keeps popping back up to the front of your followers sort of like feed at the top.
yeah.
So that helps. And also as a teacher, I can't on stories during the day. I've had to be really clear of like, what do I post about and what do I not post about? And everybody wants tidy teacher content, but I just can't like give it to them because, it just doesn't make sense for like my, the flow of what I'm doing.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think that kind of like answers the question. Like, Tidydad, you will never see school content. You talk about it, but you will never show it. You can't. And it's so funny. I wish I tell my wife this all the time that I personally think that everyone has the ability to create content. Like Teresa would be an amazing content creator. She just doesn't want to do it. But I think teachers especially have so much to share, whether it's organization, whether it's special needs information or learning styles or learning challenges, or even just like reading tips. My wife, who at one point was a reading coach and still could be if she wanted to, she's certified. But I mean, I was even talking to our friend Chris about he's great at real estate. And I'm like, bro, you should start a TikTok. You should start an Instagram. You should start a YouTube channel. He's like, what would I say? And I'm like, you should talk about, I don't know. And I just rattled up like 7 ideas. And I think one of them was like the 5 things to look out for when you're closing on a home. And he said, well, everybody knows that. And I said, 0 people know that except for people in your profession. And I just think, hearing, but to go back to what I was saying earlier, like everyone has something they could share, but they quit uh, because it is a slog. It is like you have to put. I heard someone say recently, don't have a goal. Goals are great. Plans are better. So if your goal for Tidydad is, you said I would do this for free. I just want to help people clean up. I want to tidy up my life. I want to share my story. It, but if you don't have like a plan surrounding how you're going to do that, like the act 1, act 2, act 3 intermission, and a partner, whether it's yourself all by yourself or a partner to work with, actually moving through that plan to accomplish that goal, then classically it's, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And that's one thing that as a content creator, it's very difficult for me. And I'm like, I'm asking you this for the interview, but I'm also like, I can't wait to listen back to this because I'm like, yes, that makes sense. I could do that. I think that every content creator needs help with that.
It can look different for every creator, but it's
Yes.
also, you want to streamline the experience for your ideal user, because we like to think of ourselves as the like one creator that people watch.
Right.
But the reality is like people are really juggling between like 5 to 15 different creators that they're
It's a
like
competitive space.
really sort of like invested in. And so you have to know, like, ideally the user would know, like, what am I going to get sort of each time I go back to this person's page. And
Yeah.
it can come across as monotonous to people who don't fully understand it.
Yeah.
Because I had people say, why are you always cleaning? Why are you always showing your cleaning routine Monday through Friday? And so for me, I was like, well, because I'm always doing it, and it's a good, like, I've got to show myself doing something. But
Yeah.
what started to get stale was I was explaining to people what I was cleaning and why I was cleaning. So in the video, in the B-roll video, if it was bathroom cleaning day, I would say, like, I always start with the vanity, because in the bathroom, you should always start cleaning the cleanest part of your bathroom and then you work around to the dirtiest part. I start by cleaning the top of the vanity and then I work on the sink, whatever. If you post that, me posting that every single week would get super boring. So what I do now, I use my cleaning time. The purpose of it is my like mental processing in the moment, or in the morning. I have alone time. So now it's sort of like a stream of consciousness blog of like, what are all the things that are sort of going through my head. And so people are now tuning in to watch me clean, but they also want to know, like, what are the parenting thoughts that he's having today? Like, how many kids ended up in his bed last night? Which bed did he sleep in? Like, who is still waking him up? What is he struggling with as a teacher right now? What is
The
he
answer is
thinking about?
the answer is everyone. Who is waking parents up? Everyone. Everyone is the answer.
That's the idea of like, you can have the structure, you can have the organization, but you always also have to be on the outlook for like when to pivot and when to sort
Yeah.
of change up your style. And it has to go, I mean, you obviously want to serve your audience, but if you're bored with yourself or not creatively feeling
Yeah.
sort of like jazzed and energized, then it'll come across to your audience too.
I wanted to ask you one question that I think is two questions actually that are very very similar, but as we're kind of like, I want to kind of land the plane on this. If you first of all, let me say, for someone looking at your Instagram account, it would be easy for them to say this guy blew up overnight. As a matter of fact, I'm the one who called you when that massive increase of followers started to come through and said, "Man, I can't believe this just happened." And you said to me, you said, "Well, remember, Patrick, I've been doing this 4.5 years." And it was really like, it was very kind, like nothing unkind about the statement, but it was really convicting for me. Like, yeah, Tyler and Emily have really put work into this. And obviously from this conversation, you can see some of that work happening. You can kind of see some of that work played out. Um, to like, again, I watched you go from like an idea to almost 400,000 followers. And some people might think like, wow, what a blow up overnight. But it was trickle, 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 big chunk of followers, lose a couple, trickle, trickle, big chunk of, you know what I mean? Because there was something that just hit. So if you could go back a little over 4 years, what would you do? Are there any things you can think of that you would do different? Anything that you can think of that you could just like point to immediately and go, yes, if I could do it all over again, here's something I would change, whether it's to affect your growth or affect your health or anything. If you could go back, what would you change about Tidydad if you were starting today?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we're navigating now is the actual like business structure. So like, how do you set up? How do you have a concept that you then develop a like business model that you're able to scale up. And I'm going to give an example. So like we're in talks right now to bring on a brand manager. So a brand manager acts on behalf of the brand or the creator in a similar way that like a manager would for like an actor or some sort of talent. Basically, it's like trying to identify what are the good jobs, taking what our actual like business goals are and helping bring those to like fruition. But one of the things that we had to submit to her was our like finances of like the past few years of like how much money did we make from partnerships, how much money did we make from affiliates, how much money did we make from other sort of like revenue streams.
Yeah.
And we were like, oh my gosh, where does all of this live? Like
Yeah.
we had, you know, spreadsheets sort of like organized with like deliverables and you know, different things that we had been paid. But I never thought that Tidydad would actually grow into something that would make money. And I
Right.
feel like that was a misstep because we right now don't have a lot of the organization in play for how to scale up this business. And so I do feel like when you have an idea of something that you want to do, people all the time talk about a business plan. And I was always like, why would I need a business plan? I'm a dad who's posting pictures of my closet on Instagram. Like, why would I need that? But we needed a business plan when my wife was like, we're going to turn this time consuming hobby into something. Like, there has to be some sort of like way in which we're like giving back to the family. And so now we're doing a lot of that legwork of like, okay, how are we going to get finances in order?
Yeah.
The other part of this is, you know, setting boundaries. It's something that I talk about with Tidydad a lot. Um, Obviously, it's setting boundaries with time and with energy and with physical space. But I also feel like with anything sort of like content creation wise, or anything business wise, you have to figure out like what are your boundaries. And so you were mentioning, I was talking about school a little bit. You know, I've had to learn what do I talk about and what I don't talk about, and be really confident in the decisions that I've made around what I do and don't talk about. And there are aspects of Tidydad that people really want to know about. They want to know a lot more about my marriage. They want to know a lot more about the girls and their personalities and the fights that they get into, the interactions that they have. Everyone wants to see my classroom. They want to know more about my day-to-day life as a teacher. Um, you know, but we've had to be careful as we've scaled up of,
Yeah.
and I say careful, what I more so, I'm fine with being vulnerable myself, of
Mhm.
sharing stories about myself, but Emily didn't really sign up for me to broadcast her in a vulnerable way, and my children didn't either. And so I feel like that's an aspect to all of this that we're navigating. And maybe that does go back to the business plan, that it's like when you start something, like content creation is a business, and you have to see yourself as a like small business owner. And so it's thinking about how are you going to set up that business plan? Like,
Yeah.
what are you willing to spend money on? Um, what are you going to do to set yourself up for revenue streams to start to come in? How are you going to diversify your business? How are you going to scale up? What is that 1 year plan? What is that 5 year plan? Um, when do you know, and my wife and I talk about it a lot. It's like, will we know when we want to stop? You know, like
Right.
that's the hard part too, with like businesses sort of run their course. And I saw something, Donald Miller, who you know, he was in Christian circles because he wrote Blue Like Jazz years ago, but now he does business related
He
content
does
on
some amazing
Instagram.
marketing stuff. Yeah.
Um, but he was talking about earlier this week, actually, like the percentage of businesses that fail. And like, you have to sort of be ready for something to fail and you have to know when to fold, that like the majority of businesses aren't successful. But it goes back to your point of like, if I had given up after 1 year, I don't know what my 1 year numbers were on Instagram. I was having a great time. I didn't really care. Um, but I did know and I did believe that I had a story to tell, and that's what was really motivating.
Yeah.
But what I didn't do at the beginning, I didn't actually believe that this could really turn into something. And I still haven't had that moment to step back. November, there was like a Tidydad segment on Good Morning America. Like that's a huge thing. In December of this year, of 2022, we had a 6-page spread in Better Homes and Gardens Secrets of Getting Organized magazine. Like that's a huge deal. Um, we've worked with hundreds of brands over the past 4 years. Revenue, because we just had to do it for, to send off to basically the brand manager, we had to send a bunch of stuff off to her. But like revenue in 2022 was in the six figures. I didn't realize that it was six figures. Like we're still, waiting on things to come in from being paid, but I never would have thought of that. But yet, from the start, you do need to plan for those like incremental steps. Um, and I also think the third, we should have brought people on earlier. And people talk about that all the time. It's really hard to take a leap of faith and say, I'm going to bring people on to work for me when you aren't bringing in that much money. But also, it's hard for someone like me and my wife to bring anyone in because we liked the control
Sure.
and knowing that we were doing everything ourselves. And there was something that just felt easier about keeping everything in house. But in hindsight, it's like we could have brought people in sooner. Oh, this is the fourth one. This is a very long-winded, but you also have to find who your peers are that you can actually talk to, because it's actually very lonely. It's very
Yeah.
lonely to be a creator. First of all, because all of your friends and family think that you are just taking all of your time and throwing it into the wind. Nobody knows what you're doing. And it's why I talk about you being on my board of directors. There are like 4 people who from the beginning of that I can go back to like January 2019 who were like, cool, you should do that. I haven't heard of any dads like sharing this stuff. Like, just do it. But there are also lots of other people who only until we started making money had never acknowledged of like, oh, you were onto something. And now people are like, what? You can actually make money doing that? And then they're like, that's a great idea. So I have to find the people who I can talk to, talk shop with, figure out like, what are you doing to automate? When did you hire your first person? When did you hire your second person? What are the things that you have chosen to hire out? What have you had to let go of? What do you still hold control of? So all of those things I would have done at the start, but now if I were to start something new, I would know what to do a little bit differently. Um, but it's all trial and error, and that sort of makes it fun.
You hit the nail on the head, because I mean my next question, which I'm not going to ask now, because I was going to ask you like what would you tell someone else who was starting out, and I think it's one and the same. It's, you just listed 3 or 4 things there that's like, but it all begins with kind of, for me, what how hard are you going to go after this? It's allowed to just be fun. It's allowed to just be fun. And that's been really interesting for me. My 15-year old. I have a 15-year-old. He's taking YouTube really seriously, and he's starting to see some shorts like blow up, and some videos get a lot of views, and he's figuring it out. And it's hard not to look at him and be like, I've told him several times, and I'm trying not to be too aggressive about it, but I'm like, man, if you continue this, it can be a career. If you love it, it can be a career. I'm also trying to let him just have fun, whatever. But like, look as a new content creator, kind of deciding like uh, how much of how big a part of my life is this going to be? I think is one of the best pieces of advice we can give somebody.
Yeah, and that's why trying to keep it concentrated to Monday through Friday has been helpful, but also,
Yep.
talking about your son, I've learned so many different skills that have now been so helpful beyond just social media. And one of my other
Yes.
words is for the year is legitimacy. And it is legitimacy just beyond social media. So I'm working on a book proposal. I signed with two agents back in the fall. We've been working on a book proposal to try to get it sold sometimes this winter. To me, the having a Tidydad book does establish like legitimacy to me beyond just social media. Having a website where I'm blogging, that has been legitimacy. I had a writing job um, that I was writing articles that was really fun. So
Absolutely.
it's thinking about like what are all of the different ways that you can use the skills that you've honed, because all of the businesses out there are now trying to figure out social media, but also they're trying to figure out how do you now market ideas to this like new consumer. How do you use storytelling? How do you use short bite-sized pieces of content? How do you use real people as opposed to actors to sell things? How do you establish partnerships across businesses and with
Yep.
these different creators?
Yep.
So it's totally changing the landscape. And with your 15-year-old, he could have a huge career in, if you think of all of the different branches between tech or content creation or video production or writing or advertising, there's so many different things that you can use those skills for. And I think that people are now starting to see it as a bit more legitimate of a
Yeah.
sort of industry, even though the people that I talk to, like going back to the PR agent that I've been working with, she continues to say that social media is the wild, wild west.
It is.
There are really no rules. There are no rules really for why someone becomes huge or why someone fails. There are no
Yeah.
real rules around or industry standards around how much do people get paid. Um,
Right. There's not a. It's not unioned.
it's not, but there are also lots of opportunities for people who put the time into it. But the foundation of it is you have to believe in what you're creating content about, and you have to enjoy the process of figuring out how do you
Yeah.
do it all.
Yeah. It all. I think it all boils down. All boils down to consistency. I just, man, and everything that you have shared has been, like I said, I mean, we're friends. We talk all the time, and I thought this podcast was just kind of this episode, this video was gonna just kind of be fun, and you never really know where it's gonna go. But I'm sitting here, like. Wanting to end it so that I can go back and listen and be like, yeah, I should do that. I should do that. It's just been so incredibly helpful. And I have to say, like, I do just want to say, uh, congratulations, man. Like you guys have really worked hard. And I know it's not, so many content creators out there want to make money. There's nothing wrong with making money. There's nothing wrong with wanting to make money. It's great to provide for your family. But when you say like, no, I truly wanted just like to go express some of these passions, I believe you. But I think you guys deserve the success that you're experiencing, and to come on here and like share some of that with us, share some of that with me, and the dozen of people who are going to listen to this or watch this is so helpful. But before we finish, like I know we've said it 1,000 times, but where can people find you? Where can people follow you?
Yeah, so on Instagram I'm at Tidydad. I have a website, thetidydad.com, and if you want to follow my TikTok, it's the Tidydad. I don't know what you will get there besides my attempts at trying to put up content and maybe post stories on TikTok, but I still don't understand it.
I'm right there with you. Well, man, thank you so much. This has been so great. And I mean, I actually, I want to do this again sometime, but for right now, I've just got I cannot wait to absorb everything that you shared. And I'll see you in the next one, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget that links to everything you need can be found down in the description. And if you want to stay up to date with what I'm doing, you can always follow me on Instagram by subscribing to @PatrickMurphy. And while we're talking about subscribing, go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube channel as well. I'll see you in the next one.